What are you doing at this very moment? Settling in for the night. Maybe you're on a long drive or just taking a quiet moment for yourself. Get cozy. This story's gonna hook you. Hit play, comment below, and dive into this unforgettable journey. My Kate always said, you can measure a man's worth not by the money in his bank account, but by the promises he keeps. For 5 long years after she was gone, I kept my promise to her. I kept it until my knuckles were raw and my savings account was hollowed out. I kept it so our boy, our only son, could have the life we only ever dreamed of. Then one cold December afternoon, with the smell of pine and expensive candles hanging in the air, I realized my promise was being used as a weapon to erase the very man she loved. I can still feel the grit under my fingernails from 40 years of turning wrenches. It's a part of me that honest dirted. It's the dust that built Carter's Authentic Auto, a 2-bay garage in West Baltimore that became a neighborhood landmark. It wasn't just a business. It was my life's work. When Kate got sick, I sold it. Sold the clatter of the impact wrenches, the smell of gasoline, the easy laughter with men I'd known since we were boys. I sold it all, and the number that landed in my account had a lot of zeros, $250,000. I remember watching that number leave my account just as quickly. It was the down payment on a life I didn't recognize for a historic row house in Federal Hill with a view of the harbor and a property tax bill that could make a grown man weep. A house for my son David and his new wife Simone. But it didn't stop. There did it. No, a promise is a stubborn thing. It was the $3,200 that vanished from my account on the first of every month for 60 straight months to cover their mortgage. It was the $40,000 for a historically accurate kitchen renovation because Simone read in a magazine that their countertops were tragically dated. I paid for it all. Paid for it by eating simple by driving my old pickup truck until the wheels nearly fell off, by telling myself that this was what a good father does. Because I had made a promise. I can see her now clear as day. Kate propped up on pillows, her breath as fragile as a bird's wing. Her hand so frail in mine, but her grip was still strong. James, she'd whispered, her voice raspy. Promise me you'll look after our boy. Promise me he'll have it easier than we did. And I did. I promise, Ellie. I said, my voice thick with tears. I promise. It's a dangerous thing, that promise. It's the classic striver's dilemma, isn't it? You break your back climbing out of the dirt so your kids never have to feel the struggle. But you forget that the struggle is what builds the spine. In my desperate attempt to give my son a foundation, I had accidentally removed his backbone. I had made his life so easy that he no longer understood the value of the man who had paid for it. He saw the house, but he no longer saw the hands that built it. And as I sat there on their designer sofa, about to receive their Christmas tidings, I was about to find out just how little those hands meant to them at all. The house was immaculate. It was the kind of clean that doesn't come from living but from being staged. Every pillow on the designer sofa was chopped perfectly in the middle. Every surface gleamed under the recessed lighting. There wasn't a speck of dust, a scuffed floorboard, or a single photograph of his mother anywhere. It was a beautiful, expensive, and utterly soulless museum of a life I had paid for but was not allowed to touch. David couldn't meet my eyes. He just sat there fidgeting with the heavy gold wedding band on his finger, staring at the marble coffee table I'd helped him haul up 3 flights of stairs. Dad, he started, his voice barely a murmur. About Christmas dinner. Well, the thing is, he swallowed hard, the words catching in his throat like fish bones. Isabella and I were thinking maybe it would be better if you had your own celebration this year." The silence that followed was deafening. I just looked at him, my son, a man who I'd taught to change a tire and treat a woman with respect, now looking like a stranger in his own living room. Before I could even form a question, Simone glided in from the kitchen, holding a tray with 2 tiny glasses of something pale and bubbly. She set it down and smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It was a smile that assessed and dismissed you in the same instant. "What your husband is trying to say, James," she said, her voice smooth as polished glass, "is that my parents are flying in from Atlanta for the holiday. It's their first time seeing the new kitchen." "I see," I said slowly, "and there isn't enough room at the table for one more." She let out a little laugh, a delicate tinkling sound that grated on my nerves. "Oh, it's not about room. It's just a different world, James." She gestured vaguely around the perfect room. "My father is a surgeon. We'll be discussing investments art from their recent trip to Milan, you understand." And then she did it. Her eyes drifted down and settled on my hands, resting on my knees. Hands that had spent a lifetime fixing what was broken, covered in a road map of faded scars and faint permanent grease stains under the nails. She didn't have to say a word. Her look said it all. "You do not belong here." In that moment, something inside me didn't break. No, it froze. It turned from a molten core of love and sacrifice into a solid, cold block of steel. All the hurt, all the little slights I had ignored over the years, all the times I'd felt like a walking, talking wallet instead of a father, it all coalesced into a single moment of profound clarity. I wasn't family. I was the hired help, and my contract had just been terminated. This is the price of keeping the peace, isn't it? You swallow your pride so many times that you forget what it tastes like. You ignore the little red flags of disrespect until you're standing in a forest of them. We do it for our kids, for our family, telling ourselves it's the right thing to do. But peace at the cost of your dignity is not peace. It's surrender. And I was done surrendering. I stood up slowly, my old bones creaking in protest. I looked at my son, who still wouldn't meet my gaze, and at his wife, who was already admiring her reflection in the darkened window. I gave them a small, tight smile. "I understand perfectly," I said. My voice was calm, even and colder than the December wind whipping off the harbor. The drive home was quiet. My mind wasn't filled with rage or sorrow. It was filled with numbers, receipts, dates, and a plan that was beginning to form precise and methodical as rebuilding an engine one piece at a time. My old pickup truck rumbled down the highway, the familiar groan of the engine, a comforting sound in the sudden sharp silence of my new reality. The glittering lights of the inner harbor blurred in my rearview mirror, a world away from the quiet working-class neighborhood I called home. I didn't feel rage. Rage is a hot, messy emotion, and my feelings had cooled into something far more dangerous purpose. You see, when you spend your life fixing things, you learn that sometimes the only way to fix a broken system is to first take it completely apart. I pulled into my driveway, the house dark and quiet, just the way I'd left it. I didn't even bother turning on the main lights. I walked straight to my worn-out recliner, pulled out my old flip phone, not one of those fancy smartphones Simone was always tapping on, and made my first call. The bank's automated system was a maze of options, but I navigated it with a steady hand. "To cancel a recurring payment," the robotic voice chirped, "press 4. I pressed 4. "Please confirm you wish to cancel the monthly payment of $3,200 to Premier Mortgage." I pressed 1 for yes. A sterile, computerized voice confirmed the cancellation. Your request has been processed. Click. That was it. 5 years of sacrifice, 60 payments erased with the press of a single button. The first domino had fallen. I sat there in the dark for a moment, letting the finality of it sink in. And then another thought surfaced, cold and clear as ice. The mortgage was one thing, but what about the house itself? That historic row house with its ancient brick and its brand-new $40,000 kitchen. I had set up their homeowner's insurance policy myself. A premium plan, given the age and value of the property, all under my name, paid from my account. My fingers dialed a second number. "Good evening, Chesapeake Heritage Insurance. How can I help you?" a cheerful voice asked. "Hello," I said, my voice steady. "I'd like to cancel a policy. The name is James Carter." Canceling an insurance policy is a far more serious move than missing a payment. A missed payment gets you a late fee, a nasty letter. But removing the insurance on a mortgaged property, that's a breach of contract. That sends a 5-alarm fire straight to the bank's risk department. It tells them their multi-$100,000 asset is now completely unprotected. And banks, as you know, do not like risk. This wasn't a wild swing in the dark. This was a controlled demolition. For years I had been the foundation, the load-bearing walls, the roof over their heads. Now I was simply removing the supports one by one to see if the structure they had built on top of my sacrifice could stand on its own. It's a powerful lesson to learn in life. Sometimes the most significant thing you can do is to stop doing. You stop giving. You stop enabling. You stop absorbing the consequences of other people's choices. You just stop, and you let gravity do the rest. I ended the call, the silence in my small house feeling heavier now, filled with a new kind of waiting. I had drawn my line in the sand. Now all I had to do was wait for the tide to come in and for them to realize the ground beneath their feet was washing away. And I knew I wouldn't have to wait long. I should have known they wouldn't take it lying down. People like that, people who live in a world built on appearances and status, don't know how to handle a quiet no. A no to them isn't a boundary, it's a declaration of war. And I had severely underestimated their choice of weapon. It wasn't a nasty phone call or an angry text. It was something far more modern, far more vicious. My sister Patty was the one who told me. She called me a few days before Christmas, her voice tight with an anger that matched my own. "James, have you seen this? You need to see this." She sent me a link. It was to one of those glossy, high society blogs for the black elite in the D.C. and Maryland area. The kind of place that posts pictures of galas I've never been to and celebrates people I've never met. And right there on the front page was a picture of my son and Simone smiling on their wedding day. The headline, however, was anything but celebratory. It read, "A father's financial abuse, prominent Atlanta surgeon's family, harassed by bitter in-law." My blood ran cold as I read the words. The article, written by a friend of the DuBois family, was a masterpiece of fiction. It painted me as a controlling, vindictive old man, bitter about my son's success. It mentioned that I had helped out with their house, but framed my decision to stop the payments as a sudden, cruel act of blackmail designed to ruin their Christmas. They twisted my sacrifice into a tool of manipulation. They took my love and refashioned it into a weapon to be used against me. The article was filled with quotes from an anonymous source, undoubtedly Simone, talking about my difficult nature and unreasonable demands. They had taken my story, the true story written in bank statements and calloused hands, and they had burned it. In its place, they had published a gospel of a lie. This is the world we live in now. The battlefield isn't a back alley anymore. It's the internet. It's a blog post, a tweet, a Facebook status. A lie can travel around the world before the truth has even had a chance to put its boots on. They weren't just trying to hurt me. They were trying to erase me. They were trying to control the narrative, to make sure that in the court of public opinion, I was the villain. It was a calculated, cowardly attack designed to isolate me and shame me into silence. But they had made one critical mistake. They assumed I would be ashamed. They assumed that a quiet old mechanic from West Baltimore wouldn't know how to fight back in their world. They thought I would just retreat into the shadows, wounded and defeated. What they didn't understand is that when you strip a man of everything, you also strip him of his fear. They had taken my son, they had taken my money, and now they were trying to take my name, my good name, the only thing I had left that truly belonged to me and Kate. And I would walk through fire to get it back. As I stared at the screen at the smiling faces of my son and his wife floating above a sea of lies, the final piece of my plan clicked into place. They wanted to put on a show for the world fine. I would give them a performance they would never forget. It's a funny thing, fate. Just when you think you're walking into the lion's den alone, a door opens from a place you least expect. The day of the Christmas Eve dinner, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. "James Carter," a man's voice asked. "This is Dr. Alan Hayes. You might not remember me, but you worked on my old '72 Chevelle for years. You kept that car running like a dream." I remembered him. A good man. A fair man. "I remember Dr. Hayes," I said. "How are you?" "I'm fine, James, but I'm a little confused. I'm a colleague of a Dr. Dubois. I'm invited to his daughter's home for dinner tonight, and I just read a rather nasty piece of business online about you. It didn't sound like the man I knew." There was a pause. "I don't know what's going on," he continued, "but I believe a man has the right to speak his own truth. If you'd like to come, consider me your invitation." And just like that, the universe had handed me a key. I didn't arrive in my greasy work clothes. I didn't arrive looking for a fight. I arrived in the finest suit I owned, a classic charcoal gray number I'd only worn twice before, once for my son's wedding and once for Kate's funeral. It was my suit of honor, and tonight I was there to reclaim mine. I walked through that gleaming front door and into a scene of glittering artifice. Champagne flutes clinked. Soft jazz whispered from hidden speakers. Dr. Dubois was holding court by the fireplace, Simone laughing at his side. They froze when they saw me. A hush fell over the room as every eye turned in my direction. David looked like he'd seen a ghost, his face pale as a sheet. I didn't raise my voice. I simply walked to the center of the room, holding a stack of 12 beautifully bound black folders. They looked like professional business portfolios. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice calm and clear, projecting through the sudden silence. "Please don't let me interrupt. Simone and David forgot to share my Christmas gift with you all, so I thought I'd deliver it myself. I call it the Carter Family Investment, a 5-year financial review." I moved through the room with deliberate grace, handing a folder to each of the stunned guests. To Dr. Dubois, to his wife, to Dr. Hayes, who gave me a subtle, encouraging nod, and to the others whose names I didn't know. Each folder was heavy with the truth. Inside, they found first copies of the bank transfer for the $250,000 down payment. Second, a complete 60-month history of the mortgage payments from my account. Third, every single receipt for the kitchen renovation, the new flooring, the custom bookshelves. Fourth, a high-quality printout of the slanderous blog post with the most vicious lies highlighted in yellow. And last, A single final page. On it was a crisp, black-and-white photograph of my old garage Carter's authentic auto on the day I sold it. And beneath the photo, one simple sentence: "This is what love built. And this is what it bought." The silence in the room was no longer just quiet. It was electric. You could hear the rustle of paper as a dozen pairs of eyes scanned the evidence, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock to dawning horrified understanding. I didn't stay to watch the fire burn. I walked to my son, who stood frozen by the Christmas tree, a monument to a life he hadn't earned. I placed the final folder in his hands. "Merry Christmas, son," I said softly, my voice devoid of anger, filled only with a deep, profound finality. I patted him once on the shoulder. I hope it was worth it. Then I turned my back on the beautiful room, on the beautiful people, and on the beautiful lie we had all been living. I walked out the front door and didn't look back. But as the heavy door clicked shut behind me, I could hear the first stunned murmurs begin to swell into an eruption of chaos. The show was over for me. For them, it had just begun. You don't hear an explosion like that directly. You feel it. You feel it in the tremors that ripple through the community grapevine, in the sudden shocked silences on the phone. My sister Patty, who knows everyone, called me on the 26th. She was practically buzzing. "James," she said, skipping the hello entirely, "you are the talk of the town. The Dubois family left their own party before the dessert was even served. Dr. Hayes apparently told a few people the real story on his way out, and it spread like wildfire. That little blog, the one that tried to slander you, it was deleted by sunrise on Christmas morning." I listened as she recounted the stories. Simone had apparently tried to call a few of the guests to do damage control, only to be met with icy reception or voicemail. Dr. Dubois, a man who lived on a pedestal of his own making, was now the subject of quiet ridicule among his colleagues. Their social standing, built on a fragile foundation of arrogance and money, had been shattered by a dozen simple black folders. It wasn't revenge, I felt. It was a sense of balance. The scales which had been tipped for so long had finally been set right. Justice, it turns out, is a dish best served on paper in black and white. A week later, justice came knocking on my door. It was a Tuesday night, cold and rainy. When I opened the door, my son was standing on the porch, drenched and looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. He wasn't the confident man from the pristine house in Federal Hill. He was just David, my boy, looking lost. In his hand, he was clutching a crumpled, official-looking envelope, a notice of foreclosure. He didn't say a word, just handed it to me. I didn't need to read it. I knew what it was. I stepped aside and let him in. He collapsed onto my old sofa, the one he'd grown up on, and finally, the dam broke. It wasn't just a few tears. It was the gut-wrenching sob of a man who has hit rock bottom. Through his apology, the whole story came tumbling out. His fear of disappointing his wife, his shame at not being able to provide the lifestyle she demanded, his weakness in the face of her family's condescension. "I was a coward, Dad." He choked out, his face buried in his hands. "I was so afraid of losing her, of losing that life, that I was willing to lose you. And now I've lost everything." I sat in my recliner across from him, letting him empty all the poison out. I didn't interrupt. When he was finally finished, his sobs quieting to ragged breaths, I leaned forward. "I forgive you, son," I said, and I meant it. "I forgive you for being weak. I forgive you for being afraid." He looked up, his eyes filled with a desperate flicker of hope. "But forgiveness and consequences," I continued gently, are two different things. I cannot fix this for you." The hope in his eyes died. "But the house, that house is not a home, David." I told him, my voice firm, but not unkind. "It's a stage for a life you can't afford. The price of living your own life is carrying its own weight. It's time you learned how." This was the hardest lesson I would ever have to teach him. The lesson that true love, real fatherly love, isn't about writing checks. It's about letting your children feel the weight of their own choices so they can finally learn to stand on their own 2 feet. He left an hour later, not with a solution, but with a sliver of something more valuable: self-awareness. He was still broken, but for the first time in years, he looked like a man who was ready to start rebuilding. As I watched my old pickup truck's headlights disappear down the street, I didn't feel sadness. I felt a quiet peace. The echo of my promise to Kate was finally fading, replaced by a new, more important promise to myself to never again build a legacy on a foundation that could be so easily washed away. It was time to build something that would last. You don't build a legacy by saving money. You build it by investing it. For years I had been investing in the wrong thing, in bricks and mortar, in a life that wasn't my own. 6 months after that rainy night, I decided to invest in something that couldn't be foreclosed on potential. I took a portion of the money I had saved, the money that no longer went to a mortgage I didn't owe, and I partnered with my sister Patty. We started a non-profit foundation right in our old neighborhood. We called it the Kate Carter Promise. It wasn't a fancy charity. We provided scholarships for kids who wanted to go to trade school and bought high-quality tools for young apprentices who were just starting out, trying to build a life with their own 2 hands. The final scene of my story doesn't take place in a quiet, lonely house. It takes place at a vibrant summer block party, the street filled with the smell of BBQ smoke and the sound of laughter. I'm not in a suit. I'm in my favorite old t-shirt, covered in sauce, a spatula in my hand. I'm surrounded by my sister, my nieces and nephews, and a dozen young, eager faces, the first recipients of our scholarship. They're showing me pictures of their projects, asking me questions about engines, their eyes bright with the kind of hope and determination I hadn't seen in a long time. This was real. This was family. Not by blood, but by spirit. And then I see him. At the edge of the block party, standing hesitantly by a parked car, is David. He's thinner, and he's alone. He's not wearing a designer suit, just a simple work shirt. Our eyes meet across the crowded street. There's a long road ahead for us, a lot of trust to rebuild. But as I look at him, I see not the coward from the living room, but a man who is finally starting to understand. I give him a simple nod, an invitation, a beginning. He starts to walk towards us slowly, but he's walking. I turn back to the grill, a genuine smile on my face for the first time in years. For so long I poured my life's work into a house, a symbol. But a legacy isn't built in a house. It's built in people. It's built on respect. And it starts not by keeping a promise to someone who's gone, but by finally keeping a promise to yourself to live a life of dignity on your own terms. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt taken for granted or had to fight to reclaim your power, let me know. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and share your own experience in the comments below. There is strength in our stories, and I read every single one. Thank you for listening.